Direct object pronouns in Spanish are pronouns that take the form of a direct object within a sentence in order to avoid repeating a noun in the sentence. As an example, take a look at this sentence in English. I buy a car. I is the subject, buy is the verb, and car is the object that's directly stated in the sentence. However, most of the time, we change the object from a noun to a pronoun whenever we speak. Instead of saying I buy a car, we can say I buy it. And now it becomes a direct object pronoun rather than a direct object noun. And you have to remember that a direct object pronoun is when a sentence has only one direct object, typically coming right after a conjugated verb in English. The phrase I buy a car has a subject, a verb, and only one direct object that's a noun. The phrase I buy it likewise has a subject, a verb, and one object that's a pronoun. And this is where you get the name direct object pronoun. And that's basically how direct object pronouns work in English, but the most important rule to remember is that a sentence has to have only one direct object, typically following a verb in English, regardless if it's singular or plural. And these direct object pronouns look like this in English: me, you, him, her, it, us, all of you, and them. In Spanish, direct object pronouns work the same exact way with a bit more variety, and they all share one rule that has to be applied most of the time, and that is direct object pronouns in Spanish have to come before a verb rather than after a verb. In Spanish, direct object pronouns look like this: me, te, lo or la, nos, os, and los or las. The first thing you should know about these pronouns is that the lo, la, los, and las pronouns are the only pronouns that have gender and plurality. While the other pronouns may refer to me, you, us, and all of you, lo, la, los, and las can also mean it or them as an object or a person. Lo can mean him or it masculine, la can mean her or it feminine, los can mean them masculine as in an object or a person, and las can mean them feminine, object or person. Once again, you have to remember that these pronouns come before a conjugated verb. Consider this phrase in Spanish: Yo compro un coche. I buy a car. In English, if you want to replace the object noun with an object pronoun, you would say I buy it, putting the it after buy. In Spanish, however, you cannot do that. So instead, you put the object pronoun before the conjugated verb. In this case, considering that coche is a masculine word, we need to use lo as the pronoun. You would want to say yo compro lo, but Spanish says that you have to put this pronoun before the verb. So instead, you will say yo lo compro. I buy it. I don't know why Spanish does that, but it's something that has to be known. And of course, you can generate many more examples in Spanish, and I even recommend that you do so because direct object pronouns in Spanish is a topic that I've personally seen many students struggle with. You can have phrases like I want the books, yo quiero los libros, with los libros being them masculine, and you can instead say I want them, which in Spanish would be yo los quiero. You can also say something like they have a house, ellos tienen una casa, but you can instead say they have it, which would be ellos la tienen. You can have simpler sentences like I love you, which uses a pronoun immediately without needing to modify a noun for a pronoun, so the sentence would simply be yo te amo, I love you. You can repeat this concept with another pronoun that doesn't need to get modified, like nos. You can say you watch us, which would be tú nos miras. And the same concept can basically be applied to any sentence you want to say. However, there are more things you should know about direct object pronouns, specifically relating to people and using pronouns like him and her. You can have a sentence like she watches John, and you would want to say ella mira John, but Spanish says that whenever you have a connection with a person, you have to put a personal preposition a before the person's name. So you would simply say ella mira a John. She watches John. There is no English equivalent for this construction, but you can instead say she watches him, which would be ella lo mira. And the same concept applies to any sentence you want to say, but keep in mind the personal preposition a before you say a person's name. The last concept you should know with direct object pronouns in Spanish is that all of these pronouns can also be placed after infinitives, which actually makes your thinking process think a bit better and more similar to English than to anything else. Take this phrase for instance: I can see you. In Spanish, you would want to say yo te puedo ver, and this sentence actually has no mistakes. However, there is a different way to say this phrase, and that is by attaching the direct object pronoun to the infinitive. You can say yo te puedo ver, but you can also say yo puedo verte. I can see you. It doesn't matter which phrase you say, because in case you forget how to say one phrase, you can always say the other. You can have examples like they want to buy the books, ellos quieren comprar los libros, with los libros being the masculine pronoun, which would be ellos los quieren comprar or ellos quieren comprarlos. You can also use direct object pronouns when speaking in the near future, such as I'm going to read it or I have to read it, which can be said as yo lo voy a leer and yo lo tengo que leer, or if you want to simplify the order of the words, you can say voy a leerlo or tengo que leerlo. However, whenever you decide to attach a direct object pronoun to an infinitive, you have to remember that there are infinitives that don't change form, like in these phrases, but you can sometimes have infinitives that do get modified in the present progressive. You can say a sentence like you're watching me, which can be said as tú me estás mirando or tú estás mirándome. And both phrases have the same meaning, but with the second phrase, you have to put an accent on the infinitive to maintain the emphasis on that syllable. Tú estás mirándome. And you can say other phrases like they are reading it, ellos lo están leyendo, or ellos están leyéndolo, with an accent on the infinitive. Overall, you have to remember that you cannot attach direct object pronouns to conjugated verbs, only to infinitives. You cannot say something like yo compro lo, I buy it, because you have only one verb in the sentence and the direct object pronoun is placed after the verb. But you can instead say yo voy a comprarlo, I'm going to buy it, or yo estoy comprándolo, I'm buying it. Because in these cases, you're using one conjugated verb and one infinitive, and the direct object pronoun is attached to the infinitive, not the conjugated verb. And the same concept applies to any sentence you want to say, and actually, I recommend many beginners to use direct object pronouns by attaching them to the end of infinitives because it makes your brain think in the same order of the words as you would use in English. You don't say in English, I it am buying, yo lo estoy comprando, but you instead say, I am buying it, yo estoy comprándolo. And the same concept basically applies to any sentence you want to say. This has been a full explanation of direct object pronouns in Spanish. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully I made your learning just a bit simpler.